All right, guys. Welcome back to the show. Today, Misty and we are going to talk about bum, 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 buyer outs. How to get out of the contract. Now, I'm not telling you to go get in a contract and get out of the contract, but we're going to be a little Texas based, talk about the truck 1 to 4, contract, and just a couple little things you guys need to know. I know we have some real estate agents that listen to this. I know we have some newer investors that listen to this, and I know we have experienced investors that listen to us as well, which they know these things plus more. So we're not going to sit here and go over the entire contract, from section one all the way to the very bottom, but I think there's a couple things that are important that even I didn't know this, that when we, it started, that, hey, that's an important item. Not till later on, I was like, oh, that's an important item. So, and if you're not told it, then you might not know it was an important item. So, one of the first things I like to kind of start with, obviously, is, and this is for some, I guess for anyone listening today, this is like the small little crash course for maybe some newer investors or someone who's wanting to get into that game, or they just started, or they don't really understand it as much, or some of the, obviously agents and things too, from a different perspective, from from our perspective as investors. So, but the option period, you guys, it's
I think it's important to note that the seller doesn't have a lot of options to get out of the contract.
yeah,
So the contract is actually geared, it gives the buyer several opportunities to get out of the contract, but the seller's pretty much in it.
yeah, it's like 32 outs. There's like a lot of outs for the buyer, but the seller's just pretty
Yeah,
much
some of
stuck.
them won't be applicable because it's the property, is not in a HOA or this or that
Yeah.
with the property. But there are more built-in outs for the buyer than the seller.
There's fundamental things you've got to know. So obviously, everyone, when you first get in this game, there's an option period. There's that period of time where you can say, look, I'll pay you 150 bucks, whatever that number is. I'll pay 150 bucks, and in the contract, it's 5A. That's what it is. It's section 5A. It's I'll pay you X amount of dollars for to have the option to go through, look at the house, look at the property. And again, we're talking single
To
family, guys.
temporarily pull it off the
Pull it off the
market.
market, and nobody else can put it under contract. Nobody else can can take it from us. And I have X amount of days. And 7 days is pretty typical, especially if you're a retail buyer or a little bit newer. I would recommend newer. I go for shorter option periods now just because I pretty much my inspection is I walk around, look up, like, yeah, I about know what I'm dealing with here. So you when you've done it.
What is it? Bricks and sticks?
Yeah. We've got a friend of ours that he has a client that always says it's bricks and sticks and they can all be fixed. I like that. He told me that years ago, and I was like, I like that. Yeah. So I don't things aren't as scary, but when you're newer, 7 days is legit. I mean, gives you some time, but one thing I that I think is helpful, Misty, if you want to talk about that clock, kind of how the clock works, because that's
Yeah.
something that that I know people get confused on, especially if you're newer. Explain how that
Yeah.
clock works.
So once the contract is executed, so that means that both parties have signed, the seller and the buyer has signed, and then the seller's agent, or if they're not represented, the seller has executed the contract. They've dated it and said, okay, it's official. We are under contract. That is day zero. And so whatever option period is written into the contract, you have to go by. And on that final day of the option, it ends at 5 p.m. local time to where the property is located. So that means that you have that many days to get the property inspected, to go get any measurements that you want. Any contractors go look at it, and if you're going to be doing some renovations and getting some quotes on that or what have you, you need to do it during that time. Um, I definitely recommend, some of the major things be inspected. If you think there might be a foundation issue, have a foundation company go out there. Definitely have the roof inspected unless it's like brand new. And you might even have the plumbing inspected or electrical or something like that, the AC.
Yeah, and the roof's not hard. The roof should just. I mean, that should almost always be a given because
Yeah.
I'm not going to say they're always free, but the insurance covers it, and so there's no reason why you shouldn't.
A lot of
It
times the
should.
seller can put in a claim on their
Yeah.
insurance and get a new roof prior to closing
Mm,
if needed. And so you definitely don't want to inherit a roof issue
yeah.
from the start, because you might not even be insured once you put in, you move in, or you close on the property, and then your insurance company sends somebody out and says, "Whoa, this roof ain't coverable."
Mhm.
And you're like, "Oh."
Yep.
Then, you're out 10,000 or something to
Yeah,
put on a
right.
new roof. So
Yep.
definitely want to get that inspected, especially since the roofers usually don't charge a fee to go out and inspect it. So, but basically you have to get all that stuff done, whatever you want to get done during that time. You also need to allow time for them to get those reports back to you with their findings, and then you'll need time to review those findings and decide what's important, what's costly, what needs to be done. And then you have negotiation time. So you have to negotiate with the seller, this is what came back. Do you want to handle that? You repair it, or do you want to give me cash in lieu of repair? Or, you know, negotiations back and forth. But all of that needs to be taken care of and signed for. So if you have any amendments to where they're either going to seller at their cost, repair this or that, or, you're going to do seller concessions because they're saying, "Hey, I'm just going to give you 5,000, you take care of it."
Yeah.
So,
This mean
all that negotiation needs to be done and signed for by both parties prior to that 5 p.m. cutoff on that last day.
absolutely. And this too is we're talking Texas. So I'm not talking Oklahoma. We're talking Texas contracts. So if you guys hear this and you're like, well, in such and such, we have, yeah, okay, and then and it doesn't turn out. No, we're specifically speaking about Texas. But in the instance that you are buying something and you have an option period within whatever state or whatever, utilize it to the fullest. I mean, always use it to the fullest. And again, 7 days is pretty legit when you first
Yeah,
start.
just keep in
But
mind
don't.
inspection companies usually work on the weekends and stuff, and they're, kind of a jack of all trades, but expert at none. And so you do want those extra inspections on certain things depending on the property. But, those companies like a roofer or something, they might not have availability for 2 to 3 days or something, or especially if you're executing over the weekend or on a Friday. If you execute on Friday, that's day 0. So day 1 and 2, Saturday and Sunday. Were
Yeah.
you able to get anybody out during that time without scheduling ahead? So you want to keep that in mind and not do like a 3 or 5 day, option period,
Yeah.
because your time's already counting down
You can always offer to pay more for another option for more option time
before it expires.
before it expires. But that's on deal by deal basis. I'm not going to say that will or won't work, but
Yeah.
it's an available there. So that's one of your
Sometimes the seller won't agree.
yeah.
So
Yeah. So that's like your first out that you have as a buyer is that. So you want to make sure that especially if you're not familiar with the process, you're going to, that you're gonna you exercise it, right? I
mhm.
wouldn't recommend a 5 day or anything. I wouldn't. I think it's who you're working with. I mean, we can run a 5 day, and someone else may, but I wouldn't do a 3 day or a 2 day.
Yeah, if you're brand new to the process and you don't have
Give yourself
vendors that you're used to calling out on a
yeah.
regular and stuff. Yeah. And then um got my train of
The well,
thought.
I know for us for us when we do it, it's day 0, someone gets a call. That's just it. As soon
Yeah.
as, "All right, cool, go time." So the clock ticks. So we
Yep.
just make sure that we're done, and that way we can try to have, 2
Everything lined up.
days, yeah, a day or 2, we're to be able to negotiate if there's anything we need to do, so it just depends on what the situation is. So, yeah, so option period, that's one of the first things you've got. Another thing that you'll see is a copy of leases. Obviously we're talking about investing. So, if there's a lease on the property, you need to be able to have those copies of leases and they have to give you that within 3 days, of the effective date. So that's something that's important. They got to give you those leases. So and then you can actually say, after such and such date, you can fill in the blank. And I'm just talking out loud. I'm paraphrasing, so you need to go read this yourself. But in the contract, which is section 4 for Texas, but it's you have you can say, hey, I want to, after so and so days of reviewing the lease, I have 2 days or whatever to be able to make my decision and back out. So, but that's still important. We always, you want it, you need to see those leases. If you're getting a property, you need to see the copy of the lease
Yep.
because you would be surprised the lack of leasing that people do. No joke. The lack of leasing people do. We are working on a deal where the owner, I'm not shitting you, the owner decided to a $200 deposit and use an apartment lease and barely had anything in it. Like it's a very small, like it's just
Yeah.
nothing. I think we went into one situation where there was no lease and they had to go write by hand a
Mhm.
lease. Like this is like can't make this shit up. Like that. They literally like
I remember when I was qualifying a tenant for a property. Of course, they didn't get qualified, but I asked for proof of, what they were paying to their previous landlord and stuff, and they sent over a piece of paper that they wrote on a monthly payment of such and such and move-in date this, and that's pretty much all they had for a lease.
let me get my pad and pen.
I
Get
was
this
like,
thing
oh my
taken
God. And
care
they
of.
even misspelled their name.
Their own name or the landlord the landlord misspelled their
The
name.
landlord misspelled the tenant's name.
Hold on, Miss Misty. Let me get my pad and pen. We're gonna
If that was in
get you.
fact something that the landlord wrote. I don't know.
Yeah, no, his wife wrote it. That's why. It's amazing, So those are some outs, man, that can give you, well, hey, if you don't have anything, I mean, so just something to be aware of,
And once you go under contract, that landlord cannot negotiate leases with that tenant without your approval.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So those, there's no bye bye to those tenants. They can't do up it or anything. It's
They
just
can't sign them up for a new 12 months. They can't, make any changes and stuff
yeah,
without your approval.
they're stuck. And
'Cause
so
you don't want to be stuck with someone for 12 more months if that wasn't what you're going to do. Your plan was to kick them out, or not kick them out, but have them vacate
or raise
and
the rent.
or
You wanted
yeah,
to raise the rent. Yeah, yeah. You can't. If you now another 12 months, now I was supposed to raise the rent because it was way under
and now
rent.
I'm committed to this number
Stuck with you.
and yeah, my numbers don't work now.
Or maybe they just walk in and they're like, I'm stuck with you. I want to be stuck with you. Trying to get rid of your ass. So another one is in the Texas contract. It's again, they may change these numbers around, but I'm just throwing it
Yeah.
out there for you. But it's 7B number 2, which is seller's disclosure. So the seller's disclosure, it almost gives you, and by no means, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not recommending how you should structure things, but it can almost give you an out without paying an option period if things are done a certain way. So if the seller understands what they're doing, they're going to give you that seller's disclosure.
They'll have it in the listing.
Yeah, either in the listing or at the moment of execution.
Yep.
Here
you go.
there you go. It's all together because in 7B2, uh, it basically states that the buyer has not received the seller's disclosure and they have 7 days to cancel to back out. Again, paraphrasing.
For any reason.
They back out for any reason,
And get their earnest money back.
earnest money back. And that clock doesn't tick until they get the seller's disclosure.
Mm-hmm. So you don't even want to do it at execution because they would have had to already mark that selection,
Mm-hmm.
which automatically gives it. So even if they give it at execution, they still have 7 days.
Yeah. So you have to. So you need
So
to
you
give
want
it
to give it to them before they even write
beforehand.
up the contract. That way they have to select the other option.
Right. So you're the buyer. So if you're buying it and it's off market, it's not a bad idea to go, I haven't got that thing yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can give you a freebie, and it can lock things in for you. So, know that that's there. That's a big one. I know one time we years ago were buying a property and the lawyer that we went through was like, man, was stressing the importance of the seller's disclosure, and that you can go back and I mean there's people that go back and really scrutinize what was on there after they purchase and it can cause some issues. Now, so basically take your seller's disclosures seriously. Don't just I don't need
Review
it.
them.
Yeah, review them and don't be like, I don't need it, blah blah blah.
But also do your own due diligence.
Do your own due diligence. So that seller's disclosure can give you a free out, and it can help you as the buyer. We're talking from the buyer's perspective. If it was a listing, if you're a listing agent, you put it in in the MLS, so that way it's been received. If you are if you're selling it off market, you got to make sure you give that out.
Yeah,
So
make sure you have it.
make sure you have it. So just understand that part right there, especially in Texas. And again, we're talking Texas. I'm not talking any other state. I don't want someone living in California and being like, Christopher and Misty told me about such and such down there in Texas. I don't need that shit. It's just what we have here. This is it. So, make sure you have those. So those are some of the main ones. Again, there's other stuff, HOA, things like that. It's a long list. But, not to don't want to bore anybody with that one, but I think just those are some of the ones you should pay attention to as you kind of move along your journey of
Yeah, some of the ones that affect most properties.
yeah, that's it, all encompassing most properties,
Mhm.
but there's other stuff as well again that are outs that can affect different properties, but it's going to vary from property to property. But you definitely want to make sure seller's disclosure, your option period is filled out correctly. The amount of
And
days
you
is enough.
calculate it
You
correctly.
calculate it correctly. Yeah, yeah, don't mess that up.
Mhm.
Calculate it correctly, and then of course copy the lease. And then one thing too that isn't out that you want to make sure that you close up for yourself is that you drop off the earnest money and the option at the title at the correct time. You
Yes.
have 3 days. You can't, so
It's
run,
not 3 business days,
yeah,
3 days.
3 days, and that clock ticks. Explain the clock.
So, just like the option period, the execution day is day 0.
Hmm.
So, depending on what day the execution day is, depends on, when it's due. So, if you execute on Thursday, that's day 0. Day 1, Friday. Day 2, Saturday. Day 3 is Sunday. Well, the title company is not open on Sunday. So then it becomes the next business day that the title company's open. So if Monday is a holiday, then it would be Tuesday. But if not, then Monday's your deadline. And title companies generally close at 5 p.m. So that's your cutoff.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So,
But definitely call that
yeah,
title company and make sure.
yeah, yeah. And that's not a buyer out. That's a buyer screw up. So don't do anything that's going to jeopardize you and get you out of the contract and make a mistake, because we've seen that. We've seen that on the retail side that we had a deal that we were, Misty was the agent for, and on the opposing side, they found out they didn't even drop any of it off,
Yeah.
right? They didn't
Yeah,
even.
they didn't drop off any earnest or option. And then they contacted me at like 3:45 p.m. on the last day of the option period that they would have had, and was trying to negotiate. And I said, "Excuse me, you don't have an option period." And they said, "Well, it's in the contract." Well, it's also in the contract that you were going to pay for your option period,
Nope.
and title company has verified that they have not received anything.
You just
So
turned.
therefore, you do not have an option period.
Yeah. Not only do you not have an option period, if the seller wanted to, one of two things could say, we're not selling to you.
Mhm.
Bye. We're changing. We're gonna go with someone else. They could just get out completely. The seller could, or two, the seller could enforce it and say, guess what? You pay, and you lose your option time, and now your money, your earnest money is hard, and you're gonna lose all of it when you pay. So you have to move forward now, or move forward or lose the money.
Yeah.
So your options get limited. So don't
And
let
don't
yourself.
try, even if he did pay the money, please don't email somebody at 3:45 p.m. when it ends at 5 p.m. and try to negotiate.
Yeah,
It's so horrible.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I screwed it up. So, but guys, know
Mhm.
your outs, know where you're at. It's important that you have those items, and again, they're all encompassing. So, hope that helps. Hope that kind of gives you a little education, and we will catch you guys next time.